Hi there, Karen O'Connor of SingWise.com here. Restructuring the voice. What does that mean and what does it entail? It means taking the way that we habitually set up the structural component of our vocal instruments, how we form the vocal instrument both in preparation for playing it and while playing it, and tweaking that form so that the vocal instrument functions more optimally and produces better results. It would be the vocal equivalent of adjusting the action on a guitar or an instrument manufacturer making some subtle modifications to the dimensions or proportions of the instrument's body in order to help it produce a different or more desirable timbre. Now, we can't actually change the materials out of which our instruments have been built, but we can make adjustments or modifications to how we form it for playing purposes. The conventional approach to voice training involves learning how to structure the vocal instrument while making sounds. And doesn't this make sense, right? We're learning how to sing, and singing means that we're making sounds. The problem with this approach, though, is that as soon as we start to think about singing or even speaking, we immediately call upon the habitual postures, which may include the activation of constrictor muscles, poor or imbalanced onsets, forceful breath pressure, and so forth, that we've come to associate with singing or speaking. We automatically return to those habitual voice use patterns, as well as our emotional and cultural associations with the use of our singing voice. And oftentimes those habitual postures are what's standing in the way of our being able to make beautiful, free sounds. On page 22 in his book, The New Voice, Alan Green states an instrument cannot be built and played at the same time, and he likens trying to make sounds, to sing, before the vocal instrument has been properly structured to attempting to play the violin while it's still a block of wood. Now, our vocal instruments have a structure already, that's true, but again, is that structure compatible with or conducive to the kinds of sounds that we wish to make and the kind of healthy use that will make our singing voices sustainable in the long term? So, as paradoxical and counterintuitive as it may seem, it's often best and most effective to start developing our singing voices by first preparing and retraining them in silence. Unless and until our throat muscles and such are under our complete volitional control, attempting to develop the voice by making sounds will only yield the same habitual sounds. The objective of restructuring the voice then is to reverse the coordinative muscular process in the sound producing mechanism that has led to our undesirable tone and or vocal health issues. So let's talk about preparing the voice in silence. There are several ways to do this, and today I'm just going to share a few of these ways in which I help my students restructure their instruments before going about their singing tasks. The first simply involves practicing inhaling deeply through the nose or mouth. We want an aligned posture, thinking tall as though an imaginary string attached to the top of our skulls is pulling us up, which is going to give us a released neck and a widened and lengthened back. We want a released jaw that's going to be neither too far forward nor too far back. We also don't want it to be too dropped. A slight lift of the zygomatic muscles, the cheek muscles up under the eyes, sort of an inner smile or a very subtle Mona Lisa smile, which can be achieved by thinking of something pleasant and getting a smile in the eyes. An elevated soft palate if we're inhaling through the mouth. A tongue tip that's gently touching the backs of the lower front teeth, a tongue root that's forward and out of the way, and a larynx that's comfortably lowered without any conscious effort on our parts. We want to think multidirectionally with this space as well. Think high and low, front to back, and side to side. We allow the breath to come into us rather than drawing it in some forced or panicky manner. Now, you're probably thinking that you already know how to inhale, but how we inhale for singing tasks is a little bit different from how we inhale while at rest or for speech. It's deeper and lower and often faster. The rib cage expands more and the diaphragm lowers more because the demands of singing are higher. It's based on the same physiological principles of breathing for speaking, of course, but we have to enhance those actions of the respiratory system for singing. And again, the resonant singing voice requires more space in the vocal tract. Not only must we enlarge and maximize this resonating space at the time of inhalation, but our muscles need to be trained to maintain that openness during singing, which is a lot harder to do for most people. And this is where my second strategy comes in. In my teaching, I incorporate a number of concepts and exercises from the Alexander technique, one of which is the whispered ah. We start with the correct body alignment and the multi-directional space and deep and low inhale described a moment ago, and then we release that air out through slightly adducted, slightly brought together vocal folds so that we can create an H sound, almost like an aha sigh, a light release of the air, not an exasperated kind of sigh that's taken up really, really high and that's forceful and loud, but a pleasant release of the air. You want to let the air come out, don't force it, which will only cause the vocal tract to narrow, the throat to shut down. The turbulent sound of the H should not come from any kind of constriction along the supraglottal vocal tract, the vocal tract above the vocal folds. Also, release the air very evenly and steadily. In the description below, I've included a link to a video by an Alexander technique practitioner that will offer you some more insight into an instruction for the whispered ah. So now we're adding the exhale element to your restructuring process. This is a little bit like the yawn sigh used in speech therapy and also sometimes for some of my students to eliminate vocal hyperfunction and constriction. You inhale with a partial yawn stretch posture, not quite a full yawn, and then you exhale in that same posture. My third favorite strategy for restructuring the voice in silence is kind of a continuation of or extension of this whispered ah. It starts with the posture of the first exercise and maintains the vocal tract openness and ease of the whispered ah during the exhale phase, but also incorporates a vowel posturing. So we set up our vocal tracts as we inhale, all that space, right? And then as we prepare to exhale, we assume the posture of a vowel without losing the vocal tract openness and freedom of the whispered ah. Remember not to force the breath out. Over time, we can expand this exercise to include a series of vowels, even imagining these resonant, spacious vowels being sung in musical patterns as we exhale. The key is maintaining the posture assumed at the time of inhalation. I like to close my eyes so that I can better envision the vowel and the space in my throat. In a future video, I will discuss the concept of inhalare la voce, to inhale the voice, and how it can be used effectively to maintain this open, non-constricted, inspiratory posture of the vocal tract throughout the sung phrase as we imagine the voice coming into us instead of being pushed out of us. But before we start to introduce phonation, singing, we want to start by thinking about our vocal sound and maybe even changing our mental concept of tone in terms of vowel pitch and register. We also want to start imagining new sensations. These sensations of openness and freedom and even passivity in the throat region are ones that we want to start including in our mental rehearsals of our singing. Don't underestimate the power of the mind to change everything about how you approach the physiological aspects of singing. From basketball to firearms training, multiple research studies have supported the effectiveness of mental practice or mental rehearsal in the acquisition of motor skills. These studies typically divide the participants into 2 or more groups, one of which physically practices the skill daily, while the other merely visualizes successfully shooting the baskets or the targets without actually physically practicing the skill. And consistently, both groups show improvement at the end of the study period. For singing, this would entail more than just visualization though, because we also have the element of sound to introduce. We'd have to imagine our sound with actions and results that are hidden from our view for the most part. This voice that we imagine has to be our own. We have to divorce our imagined ideal voice from the voice that we're used to hearing coming out of our mouths. But this voice still has to belong to us, not to someone else altogether. We have to have realistic expectations of how we're going to sound based on our own individual anatomy and timbre. In your imagination, how does the voice sound? How resonant is it? How fluidly does it move between pitches and register? How does it feel? What are the sensations that you imagine feeling? Of course, we don't necessarily want to rely on former sensations, the sensations that maybe tricked us into believing that our coordination was right when in fact it was unproductive or unhealthy. Does your throat feel released like it does when you're restructuring it in silence? I know this is a lot of psychobabble, especially coming from me, but I wouldn't say this if I didn't earnestly believe that there weren't a great deal of merit to it. If we can imagine our voices being freely produced and pleasant sounding, we can make it happen. So keep restructuring your voice in silence. Don't be in a hurry to introduce sounds until you've released those constrictor tensions and faulty patterns, including the mental ones, that are holding you back from having the kind of voice that you desire and that you were born to have. Thanks so much for watching today. As always, feel free to get in touch with me through commenting below, messaging me on the SingWise Facebook page, emailing me at karen@singwise.com, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Take care.